Okay, all. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate you coming out. We're going to get started because there is another demo after us, and we do not want to step on their toes. So, my name is Bill Walton. I'm with Auburn University and Alabama Cooperative Extension System. Thank you. That's a very good football team. We have worked at Auburn. We have a shellfish lab over on Dauphin Island. We have worked with a number of oyster farmers to try to get off-bottom oyster farming going here in the South. But I'll hand it over to my wife. Beth is the executive director of Oyster South, actually, which is a nonprofit associated with that as well.
Thank you all so much for coming out. I represent Oyster South, which is a nonprofit organization that really supports and elevates and promotes the southern farm-raised oyster community. We have members from North Carolina, south to Florida, and around to Louisiana. So we have some of our farmers here with us today to talk to you about their process of oyster farming, and we have lots of fun question and answers for them. And of course, at the end, we all get to taste them. So I'm going to let the growers introduce themselves. I think the mic is live, so Miss Rosa.
Hey everybody, I'm Rosa Zirlott from Murder Point Oysters. We're over in Bala Battery, so it's great to see you all today.
Fletcher, Oak, North Carolina. We have Devil Shoal Oyster Company.
Bobby Smith with Savage Inlet Oyster Company on the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Boris, Guerrero. We're from Louisiana, Grand Isle. We grow Southern Belle oysters.
Thank you all.
Well, I think what we'll start with is we're going to do this in 3 parts. And the first part is these folks actually grow the oysters that you're going to have. This is a little bit different than going out in the wild and harvesting the oysters. They get the oysters as what we call seed, and they raise them up from the day they get them to the day they harvest them. They're probably in some type of basket. So they're taking care of them from the whole time through to harvest. So it's a little bit different than maybe what you're used to from seeing out of Louisiana off of a dredge boat. So what we want to do is introduce the farmers to you so you can learn a little bit about the farmers. Then we're going to talk a little bit about oysters and why they would be different. And then we're going to taste the oysters that these farmers have made so that you can taste and see those differences. So I think, Beth, you had a question to start off with.
Yeah, so we wanted to do something a little bit fun, a little bit different, and just to give you all a sense of what people are doing and how they got to be oyster farmers. So the first question for each of you is, what did y'all do before you became an oyster farmer? Rosa.
Oh, wow. Well, we're commercial shrimpers by trade. We have a 97-foot shrimp boat. And I was working with Organized Seafood Association when Auburn come into town. And they wanted to teach some people about oyster farming. And no one in our area was interested in getting involved. So helping out with Auburn, with Organized Seafood Association, I was in the know that nobody wanted to try it. So I went home and I told my husband, I said, let's try it. All we need is a boat. And so he said, well, okay. And so we tried it and we loved it. So from there on, it's history. So now we are in full-time raising oysters, have 3 million in the water for this coming year. So over 5 years, we have really went crazy. Sold 1 shrimp boat and hope to sell another one if you're interested. Talk to me later.
Brent, raise your hand.
Brent is her husband there. So.
Thanks, Rosa. Bobby. Oh, sorry, Fletcher.
Ex-commercial fisherman. Got involved in this through another person. Got it when we started oyster farm. We started out with 100,000 and grew from there. Now we're raising probably 500,000. We raise all our oysters on top of the water in oyster grows and also floating bags.
Awesome. Thank you. Bobby.
I've been commercial fishing and charter boat fishing for about 30 years. I still have a charter boat. And regulations are pretty stiff on the commercial fishermen these days. So we decided to go in a direction that maybe we could stay in business a little longer. And started last year, my wife and I and my daughter, and it's going real well. We've got, this year we'll have 600,000 to 700,000 oysters.
Awesome. Thanks. Boris.
So we came from a organic farm, so maybe 10 years ago. And our goal was always to have something sustainable. And that's what we decided to get into the oyster farming. And right now we have about 600,000 oysters in the farm in Louisiana.
Great. Thank you all. All right, Bill.
So
For off-bottom oyster farming, you are taking oysters. It's the same oyster that you'd see out in the wild, except we grow them in little baskets. And those baskets protect the oysters from being buried in the mud, also protects them from predators. So basically, you can grow oysters in areas where oysters won't survive on the bottom. You can just take them up off the bottom, and the water's perfectly good. It also lets the farmers craft their oyster, make a real pretty oyster, a real clean oyster, that I never hesitate to just tip it back from the shell. You know, the shell is so clean. The oysters eat the microscopic plants in the water. So you don't have to feed these oysters, you don't medicate these oysters. It turns out that not only you don't have to feed these things, but when you put the baskets in the water, that all the other critters in the ocean love those baskets too. They want to call those home. And I'm sure charter fishermen, we have lots of charter fishermen that come around the Zirlott farm all the time, because if you put baskets in the water, you get little crabs, you get little shrimp, you get little fish, which means you then get big crabs and big fish that want to eat them. And so you see lots of critters that use this as habitat. These farmers essentially are making oyster reefs for you on their own dime. They're benefiting the public because they are adding structure to the water. So the question is, you've seen lots of cool things in your baskets and your bags as you've gone over. What's the strangest or most unusual thing that you've seen in a basket, the thing that surprised you the most? I'll start with Miss Rosa.
Well, actually, yesterday, can I tell you, yesterday they were pulling more baskets that were on the land, and there was a snake in one. So, but he was curled up in it from the grass. But about 6 months ago, one of our guys said, "Let me go get that basket that's floating over there." And the manager said, "No, don't go get that basket. It's an alligator." So my son likes to call it the Wild Wild West where we're at. You never know what you're going to find over there. There's been snakes on the line, just, you know, all kind of creatures touching you. You're not sure exactly what's there.
Thanks, Rosa.
Tropical fish, sea snails. We don't have any alligators.
Not yet. Bobby.
I was going to use Miss Rosa's snake story because I was with her yesterday when they saw them. No, a lot of crabs, a lot of fish, a lot of sheep's head. Real good habitat for fishing for sure. Nothing too strange, not yet.
Thanks, Boris.
Well, we get to see a lot of dolphins where we are. So, like, even when we work in the farm, like, dolphins get, like, right next to us. So, that is pretty strange to see. But we also get some, like, the small bull sharks kind of thing. So, you know, that's dangerous. But, you know, we see them around. So we'd rather have the dolphins there.
Thanks, Boris. Oh, sorry.
I just thought about, we had a blue heron that stayed with us for about 6 months. He sat on a pylon and he ate so well. He loved it. We also have a dock that's down next to us, so we have pelicans and seagulls at time on every pylon. So it's a beautiful sight.
Thanks. Those are some smart birds. So, you know, everybody loves oysters. How many people here love oysters? I'm just going to say everybody. Okay, that's what I thought. So, you know, locals, people who live near and far, some famous people, celebrities, maybe somebody who's a celebrity only to you or somebody really important. We wanted to know from each of you who, if there was ever a celebrity, a famous person, or somebody who's really important to you who's had your oysters. We'd love to hear about that. So, Miss Rosa.
Most famous person or somebody that just you remember ever?
Eating your oysters. Yes, ma'am.
No, I think Guy Fieri was the most famous person. He come to our farm. We loved it. He is an awesome, fun guy. Just like you see on TV, he is really fun. So I think that's the most famous person, probably.
Thanks.
It doesn't have to be a celebrity. It could be somebody in your family, somebody that was important to you to have your oysters.
Celebrity to you.
I don't know. We take a lot of restaurants out. A lot of the chefs from the restaurants out. Nobody famous.
That's great. Thank you, Bobby.
Nobody famous for us. We'd have a Travel Channel came out this summer, and they'll be having a show upcoming sometime this winter. We're supposed to be part of that.
That's great. Which show was it, by the way?
Delicious Destinations.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Well, chefs. We get a lot of chefs. I think they're very important, the ones that eat our oysters. But also we had Anthony Bourdain this year before he passed. He had someone, you know, we could share some oysters with him, and that was pretty fun.
That's great. Thank you. You know, basically, I feel like everybody's a celebrity who enjoys oysters. That's just my own personal opinion, because you all have your own stories of why you like them, and there's a favorite for everyone. So thank you all. Bill.
But I think that's one thing that oyster farmers have found is that people care. There are chefs and there are celebrities. There are people that care about the product that you're producing, and that's important because that's very different from being a harvester where the only person that cared about your oysters was the one person who was buying them, and they would tell you the price that you were going to get for those oysters. Now, I'm not saying these guys can ask for any price that they want, but they are allowed to produce. They are producing oysters like microbrews are to beers. All right, they're not trying to produce a Miller Lite. They're not trying to produce a Budweiser. Not that there's anything wrong with those. I drink those myself. But it's nice that there are microbrews available, and that's exactly the type of oysters that they're producing, and we've seen people react to that. So the other thing is oyster farming. At Auburn, we get a lot of people that come in the door and say, I want to be an oyster farmer because I like oysters and I see how expensive they are on menus, so I want to do that. And they picture a day like this. So,
just like this all the time.
And my wife and I used to have a small farm in Cape Cod, and people would come out in the middle of the summer in July, and they would, oh, this is great. And I was like, they are never here in January when it is
Not when there's
when
ice.
it is so cold that salt water is frozen. I'm like, you can come back and help then and tell me about being an oyster farmer. So we wanted to know what's the worst conditions that you've ever seen on your farm, been through, like worked on your farm.
Well, day before yesterday was pretty bad. Our son who runs our farm for day-to-day basis is out of town right now. And so my husband's picking up the slack, and they called me first and said, oh, it's lightning and it's thundering and the water's going over the dock. What are we supposed to do? And I said, well, my husband will be there in a few minutes and he'll have a plan. Well, when he got there, he had a plan. He said, let's go to Waffle House and eat and let this clear up. But I think people don't think about the South as being cold. And these guys wear wetsuits, and if it's 20 degrees or, the water's pretty cold in the South when the weather's 20 degrees. So I think the cold and the people who live here aren't really used to working in the water. So I think that's the hardest element we have in the South is getting used to working in cold water and then getting out and still have to, just because you harvest it, there's a lot more work once you get it on the dock that you got to do. So you're getting out of the water and then you're still continuing to work. So I think right now that's probably the hardest thing that we face is dealing with the cold water, not really being used to it.
Thanks, Rosa.
Wind, northwest, northeast. Me and Bobby both farm in the Pamlico Sound in North Carolina. Northwest wind, 20-25, northeast, same thing. Cold water.
Thanks, Fletcher.
Yeah, like Fletcher said, it's a real, Outer Banks, North Carolina is known for being pretty rugged and very windy, and it'll change really quick, and especially in the summertime, squalls come up and it'll blow 40 or 50 in a squall, almost a hurricane, just on a normal afternoon some days. So it changes a lot. It's pretty tough conditions some days.
Thanks, Bobby.
Yeah, Bob was saying, I mean, for us, it changes pretty quick. I mean, days are 40 miles an hour wind, 50 miles an hour wind. But I guess the worst is when there's like thunderstorms. So like when we have thunderstorms, I mean, sometimes we're out there, and the thunderstorm is nearby, and like we come back to shore after the thunderstorm, and we can hear our ears ringing because of the sound traveling from on the water. It's like, it's crazy. We didn't even notice when we're out there. So it can get pretty rough out there.
Thanks, Boris. Yeah, it's certainly never a dull moment. Not at all. Well, our last question for our panel is, what is your favorite way to eat an oyster? Because we're all here to celebrate oysters in all different ways, and so we wanted to hear what your absolute favorite way is to eat an oyster. Rosa.
Hey, at my house, it's getting in line first and getting it, because everybody at my house loves oysters. And when we went through the training program, we raised 25,000 oysters, and we thought that was a lot, but we knew our whole family could eat them if we didn't ever sell one of them. So, but for real, I like them raw. I don't have to have anything on mine, but I do like them fried, and I do like them stewed, and I do like them in a gumbo. So I can't see any bad way.
Thanks, Rosa.
In a hot vinegar on top of a saltine cracker.
Thanks, Fletcher.
I probably like them raw the best. Maybe broiled with a little piece of bacon on them. Not a lot of other stuff, but pretty simple.
Thanks, Bobby.
I like them raw with a little bit of lemon, and that's just the perfect hint and mixture. And also a little bit of chargill too. I do like this.
Awesome. Thanks, Boris.
I thought by law the Carolina guys had to say the Carolina roast. I thought if you haven't had a Carolina roasted oyster, it's a sort of a dry roast. You put them on hot steel, hot metal, and you cover them with wet burlap, and they steam in their own juices, and they all pop. But you have to bring your shucking knife to the party because they don't open all the way, but they open enough that it's not hard to shuck them. You're just cutting the meat loose, and on an November night, it firms up the oyster, and you get that warm broth after it too. So if you get invited to a Carolina oyster roast, go.
Say yes.
These guys are almost done shucking the oysters. I'm sure you're hungry after hearing about that. But we wanted to talk about. So you'll see a menu, and today you've got. Let's see. In order, we're going to serve them as Southern Bells, Murder Points, Savage Inlets, and then Devil Shoals would be the order that we serve them in today. And you will see the differences in them. But on a menu, how would you know the difference? And so if you're going to be an oyster connoisseur, we call it a compass, and we always start in the South. And the South, the first thing you want to know about the oyster is what species is it? Anybody had a West Coast oyster? A Pacific oyster? It's a little bit different, isn't it, Brent? They're a much stronger oyster. It's a different species than what we grow. These folks all grow the same oyster, the Eastern oyster, all right? So all the oysters you're going to see are the exact same species. So you start in the South with species. Then we go east, and that's the environment. What environment do they grow it in? So, Ms. Rosa, if you could just real quickly just describe like what the environment is that you grow in, the salinity, what goes on in your water.
Well, we have a pretty mild salinity. It can be anywhere from 10 parts per thousand to 25 parts per thousand, but I think about 18 is usually the mid-range. We have just pine trees around us, and we have a natural water flow off of the marsh area, and it just gives our oyster kind of a sweet, creamy, buttery taste, the combination of those things that are around us.
That's one of the unique things about this. Even me and Bobby are probably 20 miles apart. His oysters taste totally different than mine. Same thing for pretty much everybody in Carolina. My salinity runs anywhere from 20 to 28. Highest I've seen is 32.
Like Fletcher said, it's the same body of water, and usually a different taste. Mine fluctuates on the wind direction. So ours is usually 18 to 28 parts. Northeast wind, we get seawater. I'm just inside of a place called Oregon Inlet, which is a real treacherous name, real bad inlet. And the east wind will shove the water in, so I'll have a higher salinity on a east or a northeast wind. On a southwest, like we have in the summertime, it's a lot a milder taste.
Our salinity is about 18 to 24. We have a lot of marsh around, and we have a really, really strong current going in and outside of the Gulf. So it really creates most of the flavor I think comes from the marsh. It's like a little like floral flavor, also with some kind of earth tones, I guess. But this is a very nice medium salinity oyster.
They all sound delicious. Thank you all.
So species in the South, environment in the East. The North is the nuts and bolts of how they grow their oysters. And so I know the Zirlott, you grow yours in adjustable log line baskets that let the oysters rock. Fletcher, what do you grow yours in? Oyster grows, so that's a cage that's up at the surface. Bobby, do you do the same? And some floating bags. So they've got bags that are actually floating, they never leave the water. They're going up and down with the tide, and then you guys use the same system. But in addition to the gear they use, they make different decisions about how often do you run them through a tumbler? How often are you sorting them by size? Like what size do you harvest at? Like I think you guys probably harvest a little bit larger, right? You've got what size? 3.5, 4 inches, and I think the Murder Points, and you guys are more like 2.5 to 3. And that's a decision that the farmer makes for their customers. So if you go to the north, and then the last one in the west, which we've spent this is why we wanted to have the panel, is the who and the why. And so you've met the people who do this, and you understand a little bit more about why they do that. And you can tell me that doesn't matter how the oyster tastes, and maybe it doesn't. But when I go into some place and I decide how to spend my money, that's one reason that I like to know about is who am I spending my money on, and why did they do this? So I hope that helped you folks get a little bit better sense of why these folks do it and who they are.
One other thing real quick, I know we're going to be serving up oysters soon. If y'all are going to be taking pictures or anything on social media, please go in and follow everybody if you don't mind doing that. Murder Point Oyster Company, Devil Shoals, Grand Isle Sea Farms, Savage Inlet. Is it Savage Inlet Oysters? Online. Thank you all, and I think we're going to get the oysters out there real soon. While we're waiting, does anybody have any quick questions for our panel? Besides, when are the oysters getting in front of me? We're going to start right up here.
I just wanted to know, you were talking about your out in wetsuits. Do you actually win the water when you do this, or can you work hauling the baskets up to a boat and doing that?
On our system, you have to get in the water. So everything is done standing on a muddy bottom, walking down the lines. Everything is rowed up like if you would actually see a farm. And they're hanging, the baskets are hanging on the line. So the guys get in the water and walk.
Same for me. I'm in the water with all the oyster days.
Depends on my lease varies in depth. So some of it we're fishing out of a boat, most of it. Some of it you're in the water. We have a lot of current. We have 4 or 5 knots, sometimes 6, 7 knots of current all the time. So it's kind of hard to work, standing.
Never a dull moment again, Boris.
Right, it's about the same for us. We can do some of them standing in the water, but we try to have everything on the boat because we also have a lot of strong currents, and usually it's a windy day, so it's kind of rough to stand out there.
Thank you all. Show of hands, ma'am.
So you farm them in shallow water then, pretty much, except with the few that you have in the boats, right? But you two are
Yeah, we're required with the system we use. So it's according on the type of system we're using.
Okay.
I'll just, while we're handing these out, we try to keep these cold. So these are in the order that you'll get them. They'll start in the upper left, and so it'll be Southern Bells, Murder Points, then you get the Devil Shoals, and then Savage Inlets, and then the Devil Shoals.
Yes,
That's
Savage
the order
Inlets,
that they'll
then
be in.
Devil
So the
Shoals.
ones that are closest to you will be the 2 Carolina oysters, all right?
We had one question in the back here. Sorry.
Yeah, you may have covered this earlier and I missed it, but how long does it take to grow an oyster to harvest?
That's a good question. Rosa.
Well, we have a lot of warm water, and so it's taken us 10 to 12 months because we have a lot of growing time before our water gets cold enough that it slows the growing down.
Fletcher.
Same for me. 10 to 12 months.
Where I'm at, they generally about a year and a half, but with the current we have, it seems to push it. And this last year we had oysters in about 10 months, 10 to 14 months.
Thanks, Bobby.
Yeah, ours about 10 to 12 months as well. I mean, it's really the current, the warm waters help them grow real quick, so they jet out over the summer too.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
I'm just curious that we're from Myrtle Beach originally. We've been out here about 6 years. To the North Carolina guys, what difference do you see between the North and South Carolina oysters and the ones on the Gulf?
All right, Bobby.
I couldn't really hear the question. I'm sorry.
He was asking hold on.
We're from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and we've eaten just tons of oysters from North and South Carolina. And what do you see the differences between the North and South Carolina oysters versus the Gulf oysters?
From what I was seeing, the Gulf oyster might be larger a lot of times. The ones I've had always seem to be a little saltier. I mean, I think every area you have, everybody likes their own oysters. I like ours a little better maybe, but I don't know if I had some good oysters this morning out here for sure.
It is the size. Well, you ask any farmer, like everybody likes their own oysters, but just like microbrews or wine or any kind of, craft product, handcrafted product, there's nuances between them, and there's a favorite for everybody. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Yes, I think Apalachicola got hit pretty hard with the hurricane, and I was going to ask you, how do you think, two questions. One, how does the hurricane affect the oyster beds at Apalachicola? And also, what about the red tide? How's that affecting your oyster beds?
Thank you.
Get Beth answer that.
I was going to
None of us
say,
are from
forget
Florida.
Bill, because I know he was just over in Appalach. 1 second.
Right now, we don't have a problem with red tide. I think the hurricane may have broken up and moved it out. So Alabama's not having a bad time.
So I'm sorry, I was Zirlott. Okay, so Apalachicola has been certainly hit by the hurricane. Their harvest had been down quite a bit. As some of you may know, there's been there's a lot more water being taken upstream, and so they don't have as much fresh water coming in. Now, I like a salty oyster. You guys grow oysters in pretty salty water. We all do here. But they're growing them in baskets. If you grow an oyster on the bottom, then it's vulnerable to predators, and those predators are associated with salt water. So as the salt goes up, predation goes up. There was a question about red tide. So that is a naturally occurring algae in the water, but the oysters will eat it, and they accumulate the toxin that is with that. You can rest assured that oysters have been one of the most highly regulated seafoods that we've had for well over 100 years. And so they test these waters, it seems like every day. It seems like every day they're going out and testing these waters to look for the algae. If that algae count starts to go up a little bit, they just close it. They don't wait for the oysters to get toxic. They don't wait for anybody to get sick. They don't wait to do any recalls. They just close it. So that's hard for farmers, because that's not just true with red tide. It's true with rainfalls. The public health approach is, if there's any risk increase, they shut the harvest down. To open it back up, you have to go through all sorts of testing to prove that it's safe. So the public health mantra for oysters is easy to close, hard to open, which does not make it easy to be an oyster farmer, but it is something that if I'm eating oysters that are harvested, it doesn't matter if there's a red tide in Florida. I'm not worried about going to a restaurant, because I know they're only getting legally harvested oysters. You don't want to go collect oysters yourself if you don't know what the status of the area is, of course. Did you have a question? Okay. Okay. I was asking if that lady did. Anybody else have any other questions for our folks? You can tell we're better about talking about oysters than we are serving them. These guys, I appreciate some volunteers. I see. By the way, Eric Bradley is an oyster farmer as well. He's at Navy Cove. Alina and Marcos are with the Grand Isle Sea Farms. They grow the Southern Bells. So oyster farmers jump in and help, which is great. So, do you guys have any? Yes, question.
We lived in North Carolina about 20 years, so I went to the two North Carolina guys. How badly did the hurricane affect your
Florence, we didn't have any damage in Florence. Now Bobby had more damage than I did. Yeah.
We lost about 200,000 seed. It still blew 70 up there. After it got all the way up, it still blew about 70. Florence shut the water down for Fletcher and I for about a week. But some of the places were down for a month. And some of them were destroyed. A couple of the guys, when it ran back off, some of them totally wiped the farm out. There'll be 2 years before they harvest again.
So Beth pointed out that there are other oyster farmers here. I see Brandy Shelley in the back. She grows is it Shelley's Oysters? Shelley Oysters from Port Sulphur, Louisiana, growing some new oysters. And then there were some other folks from Savage Inlet, weren't there? Did I see some? All right, where'd she go? All right, there she is. All right, so we got a few oyster farmers here. Appreciate you all coming out, because I know oyster farmers, I promise you, they don't get paid when they're not working their farm. Like, there's no, like, that paycheck only happens when you harvest. One of the things we hear about oyster farmers is you don't make any money growing oysters. You only make money selling oysters. And you guys all know that growing them takes a lot of work. And then you'll have heartbreaks like Michael or Florence or whatever. And that's just, it is part of the reason that these oysters do cost a little bit more for you. So I should point out, if you haven't been to the showcase, I think you guys are all in the showcase. I don't know, Shelley, Randy, are you guys in the showcase? No. Okay, but Navy Cove, you guys are in the showcase over there. So if you guys want to try, I think I saw 19 varieties of oysters over there. They're all farm raised, all very similar stories to these, but each their own story. So did everybody who is seated get an oyster? All right, before we thank the farmers, can I thank the shuckers? Thank you guys, because as an extension agent, people often ask me, what's my favorite oyster, which these guys always hate, like, oh, who's he going to say? My favorite oyster is the open oyster in front of me, that's right. That's right, they are all good. So could you guys thank the farmers here for coming out and taking the time, bringing their oysters? So appreciate it. Thank you, guys.